here is Bret Weinstein. This is a clip of him, I guess, on the Dark Horse podcast.
His podcast, with his with Heather or whatever her name
Heather
is.
Heyer, Hying, sorry, not Heather Heyer. I apologize. Hying, his wife. This is a clip of Bret Weinstein finding out in real time that some of his IDW buddies, the intellectual dark web, he was one of them, are that Twitter Nazis, right-wingers, far-right people enjoy their content.
No way.
How incredulous can you be when you talk like this?
I had gotten, for whatever reason on Twitter, dumped into what I call Nazi Twitter, right?
For some reason.
And I tweeted about it.
You call it?
Yesterday or the day before. And I got back a reaction that I was not expecting. When I say Nazi Twitter, I am talking about a part of Twitter where swastikas are not viewed as negative, where Hitler is quoted in an effort to illustrate that he is not who we were told he was. In fact, the idea that is commonly circulated in this part of Twitter is that the television is lying to you, which I'm sure it is, but that the television is lying to you, that Hitler actually was not interested in war. He was interested in peace, and that the narrative that has been created around him in the aftermath of the Holocaust and World War II is a construction of, you guessed it, Jews in Hollywood. Right? Now,
Amazing.
But then here's the crazy part.
They think I'm one
That's
of them.
That's not every account. Okay. Most of the accounts over in that land are replying there. And there are some people over there that I know, people who have actually defended us in some cases. These people are not Nazis, but they are now trafficking in a kind of sophistication or false sophistication that I know what it is because, frankly, I wrote a paper on it in college saying, here is what this impulse to genocide actually is. To watch people now trafficking in Hitlerian revisionism, including, seriously, we're talking about accounts who have been, in one case, an important COVID dissident account. It's an anonymous account, so I don't know who it is, but we're talking about people who should know better.
Oh, really?
So,
Because they're free thinkers.
yeah.
And free thinking could never, no free thinker has ever been a Nazi.
Bret Weinstein.
I haven't wrote a paper on that, so I don't know if I want to be so definite.
I'll just distill this down to one thing. Bret's essentially saying, gosh, I love reaping, but I hate sowing.
No, we were right. Us drunk pilots over here were actually right the entire time.
Yeah.
It really is so amazing to hear him go through this. I landed on Nazi Twitter, literal, actual Hitler-supporting, swastika-using Nazis. And lo and behold, a bunch of our fans are over there, but I don't believe they are the actual Nazis. They're just trafficking in the same language and beliefs as the real Nazis in Nazi Twitter. And imagine my shock when I discovered that some of these very same people share our views on COVID and vaccines. Oh my God.
I mean, this is why I brought that up, that Nazi shooter up to Tim Pool, was because them being confronted with the very reality that, like, these IDW types who pretend that they're liberals and that they're moderates, and yet they espouse right-wing talking points in order to make the far-right neo-Nazi types feel like their politics are a little closer to the mainstream than others. That is the function they serve. And so it's only a matter of time until that firewall between the people they're appealing to by pretending to be moderate and their ecosystem melts away. I mean, that's in part due to Elon Musk, but, like, Bret is one of those guys who essentially kicked off the campus wokeness thing and resigned and started his own podcast on the heels of that, saying, I'm a liberal, I support ex-liberal politician, but wow, they've gone too far, and the right wing eats that up. you can only maintain the liberal branding for so long, and eventually you're either confronted with the reality like Bret is, or you become a straight up right winger like, you know, Dave Rubin has admitted that who he is. But this is just a tale as old as time that like people engage in this kind of thing, these right wing grifters. And yeah, it's just is fascinating. And two, just the connection with the COVID misinformation that he espouses. He's like, and the COVID dissidents that I respected even espousing this, you know, probably because a lot of COVID lab leak conspiracy theories are based in deep xenophobia about Chinese people, or in even more extreme instances, conspiracy theories about the Jews controlling the world and it being a part of like some sort of bioweapon from the globalists. That's the pool you guys are in. Let's not pretend.
Yeah, I find this stuff infinitely fascinating because I think in some cases it's actually, this is actually an academic failing, despite him being a professor, because he just doesn't know what a Nazi is. And that's very common in America, in the US, to be confused about what Nazism contains. And in fact, what are all of its precursors? And so I think I've noticed since I started becoming involved and interested in media, that there are a lot of people who would describe themselves as like centrist, thinkers, like free thinkers who flirt with Nazi ideals. And that this is to separate them from the actual Nazis who aren't like swastika wearing neo-Nazis, but, people who believe Nazi ideals and actively try to traffic them into, rather launder them into public spheres, as though Nazism or fascism is just another type of political ideology that you have to tolerate. They use people like this who are fascinated by ideals around like race science and eugenics and other things that the United States of America was engaging in pre-Nazi, World War II, German Nazi, the Holocaust, the industrial eradication and genocide of Jewish people, and along with Roma and LGBTQ people. But we have an entire swath of thinkers who do not really understand the direct genealogy of Nazi ideas. And as a country, we have not really engaged with the ideas that led to the Holocaust or Nazism's rise in Europe. We've instead used various sorts of sloganeering to imply that that kind of thing could never happen again because it's happened once and now we're vigilant for what it looks like. When ultimately we've never really engaged with, our genocide of the native people. We don't really engage with the ways the German state and other states in Europe have like decimated Africa with their colonialism. And we have, pundits who go around like flirting with Charles Murray and the bell curve and phrenology and race science and the inherent criminality of certain populations. And then they get big in Nazi Twitter and they go, I don't understand why Nazis love me. I just asked all these questions that, appeal to them for some reason. I remember when Jordan Peterson was talking about the Jewish question and he was like, all my fans ask me about the Jewish question. And I tell them, it's X, Y, and Z. I mean, they put articles in the New York Times that are just like about Jewish people's IQs being higher. And they do so uncritically. And it's very tempting to just be like, oh, there are a lot of neo-Nazis in control of publications, or like Bret Weinstein is like a secret neo-Nazi. But I think this is, again, we just have done such a poor job of explaining like what led to the Holocaust and like Nazism, that people find themselves reinventing the wheel without even realizing what they're doing. They find themselves like reinventing like eugenics and Nazism and like palling around with neo-Nazis because they have a very like narrow understanding of what it is and what it contains, and they don't really understand that it's changed since 1945.
Or they don't care. Or they don't care either, Brandon, because they are monetizing it. I mean, the whole IDW was this. I mean, instead of Charles Murray, it's about your inherent traits as a race. It's become, it's about culture or ideology. Sam Harris is Bret Weinstein's IDW compatriot, and that was his entire thing, which is just that Islam, based on their culture and their beliefs, is inherently more violent. That is just a more modern version of what you're talking about. It's
definitely that, and it's just the lack of reflexivity and also just the lack of intellectual curiosity to ask themselves why people are grouping them with Nazis and to look into into the things that they espouse and the history and genealogy of them, because a lot of these people just aren't doing that either. They're just like coming up with these ideas, like, being enlightened by their own, well, ignorance in this case, but being enlightened by their own intelligence and just musing aimlessly about the roles of, race and determination in society. And then they just, because we live in a society full of precursors to Nazism, they just come away with a lot of ideas that are reminiscent of Nazism. And without any kind of intellectual curiosity or engagement with the past, we do end up in the same place a lot of times. Well, they end up in the same place because they're not critical about their own biases. They're not critical about the social biases that we're indoctrinated with from birth. And this is where they end up, and this is where they end up with going like, damn, a lot of my fans are Nazis, but I wonder why that might be, because I could never be a Nazi or espousing Nazis' ideas, because I just wouldn't do that. No, I won't look up my ideas.
Yep. Well said, and great last minute addition, Binder. Appreciate that. Always love a good Bret.
I saw it and I was just like, apparently there's more from that episode where apparently Heather, his wife, goes on to then blame the woke for for the Nazi Twitter. But I haven't listened to the entirety of it yet. But that clip was just too amazing to watch. The in real time, one of these guys realize exactly who they're appealing to, and then really quickly trying to dig them way out, themselves out of it.
Yeah.
He seemed genuinely surprised, which I can't,
I can't imagine.
Because he's stupid.
Well,
that's the thing. Like, some of these guys just like, we might want to give them the credit of being like really like strategic and like really good at pretending that they're not aware of this stuff sometimes. But for some of them, it's just, quite frankly, they actually aren't aware because they're just dumb.
He's fooled by his own false sophistication.
Yeah, I mean, how many people have like hundreds of thousands of people have taught at higher education facilities, many longer than his short, brief moment that I think you look into people talking about at the same time, like maybe not the greatest scholar, not a huge actual academic footprint. Like, he's a moron.
Yeah. He just found a way to monetize having like an NPR voice, but saying right-wing crap.